Most people describe missing someone as a physical ache. They check their phones obsessively, replay old conversations, feel a gnawing emptiness when certain people aren't around. But then there are others who move through life without that pull. Someone leaves, and they simply continue. No longing, no dramatic emotional void, just presence in whatever moment they're actually in. If you've never understood why missing people feels so consuming to everyone else, or if you've felt guilty for not missing people the way you're supposed to, this video will give you the psychological framework that finally makes sense of it. Let's be clear from the start. Not missing people does not mean you're emotionally damaged. It doesn't mean you're incapable of love, that you're a narcissist, or that something fundamental is broken inside you. It doesn't mean you don't care about people or that your relationships lack depth. What it means is that your brain is oriented toward the present in a way that most people's aren't, and there are specific psychological and neurological reasons why. The dominant cultural narrative around missing people frames it as proof of love. The more you miss someone, the more they must matter to you. But that's not actually how attachment works. Missing someone is a function of how your brain manages absence, regulates emotional continuity, and constructs a sense of connection across time and space. And not everyone's brain does this the same way. Research in attachment theory and object permanence shows that some people maintain what psychologists call emotional object constancy differently. For most people, when someone they care about isn't physically present, their brain continues to actively represent that person emotionally. The attachment system stays partially activated, creating a low-level sense of incompleteness until the person returns. It's similar to how a child might feel distressed when a parent leaves the room, except adults experience a more subdued, chronic version of that activation. But people who don't miss others often have what researchers describe as a more present-anchored emotional system. Their sense of connection to someone exists fully when that person is there, and then recedes naturally when they're not. It's not that the bond disappears. It's that the bond doesn't demand constant emotional maintenance across physical separation. A 2019 study on attachment variability found that individuals with certain dopaminergic reward profiles showed significantly lower distress during separation from attachment figures, not because they cared less, but because their brains didn't interpret absence as a threat or deficit. So why do other people miss so intensely? It's worth understanding this, because it's not performative or irrational. For many people, missing someone serves a genuine psychological function. It's a form of bond maintenance. The act of longing keeps the relationship active in their minds, reinforces emotional prioritization, and signals to themselves that the connection matters. In evolutionary terms, missing people likely helped early humans maintain group cohesion. If you felt distress when separated from your tribe, you'd be motivated to return or maintain contact, which increased survival odds. There's also a neurochemical component. When someone you're attached to is absent, your brain may experience a mild withdrawal from the oxytocin and dopamine hits that come from interacting with them. That withdrawal can feel like missing them. For people whose reward systems are more dependent on external relational feedback, absence genuinely feels like something is missing. But if your reward system is more internally regulated, if your baseline emotional state doesn't fluctuate dramatically based on who's around, you won't experience that same withdrawal. People who don't miss others tend to have what psychologists call a stable internal locus of emotional regulation. Their emotional equilibrium isn't contingent on the presence of specific people. They can experience deep connection, affection, even love, but those feelings exist in the moment of interaction rather than extending into a persistent longing during absence. This isn't emotional shallowness. It's structural difference in how the brain maintains relational continuity. There are multiple pathways to this orientation. Some people developed it early, often in childhoods where they learned to be emotionally self-sufficient. Maybe caregivers were inconsistent, or maybe they were simply raised in environments that didn't emphasize emotional dependence. Others arrive at it through personality, particularly those high in trait independence or low in neuroticism. Some people are just neurologically wired with less separation anxiety. And for others, it's a deliberate cognitive style, a learned capacity to be fully present wherever they are without mentally reaching backward or forward. None of these origins are better or worse. They're just different calibrations of the same human system. Here's the deeper framework. People extract meaning from relationships in fundamentally different ways. Some people derive meaning from continuity, from the ongoing narrative of connection that persists even when someone isn't there. Their relationships are stories that unfold across time, and missing someone is part of that story's texture. Other people derive meaning from presence, from the quality and depth of interaction in real time. Their relationships are encounters, moments of genuine exchange that don't require extension into absence to feel complete. Neither approach is more authentic. One isn't shallow and the other deep. They're simply different answers to the question, where does connection live? What's interesting is that people who don't miss others often have extremely high-quality relationships when they're actually with people. Because they're not mentally elsewhere, not longing for someone who isn't there or anticipating the next interaction, they can be entirely available to the person in front of them. There's a certain psychological clarity to that. The relationship exists where it actually is, not in the gap between meetings. This also means that people who don't miss others are often less prone to idealization. Missing someone can blur your perception of them. You start relating to the idea of the person, the memory, the fantasy of reunion, rather than the reality of who they are. People who don't miss tend to relate to others more accurately because they're always engaging with the person as they actually are in that moment, not the version they've constructed in absence. There's a quieter freedom in this. You're not waiting for someone to come back to feel whole. You're not carrying people with you emotionally everywhere you go. You don't need to text someone constantly to maintain the feeling of connection. The relationship is real when it's happening, and when it's not happening, you're simply somewhere else, doing something else, being someone else's present reality or your own. The guilt that sometimes accompanies this is worth addressing. You might feel like you're supposed to miss people more than you do. Maybe you've been told you're cold, or distant, or uncommitted. But the absence of longing is not the absence of care. You can love someone deeply and still not miss them when they're gone. You can value a relationship immensely and still be perfectly content in its absence. These things are not contradictory. They're just operating on different emotional architectures. What you're experiencing is a different distribution of emotional investment. Where others spread their emotional energy across time, maintaining active representations of people even when apart, you concentrate yours in presence. Both strategies work. Both create real relationships. Yours just doesn't announce itself through longing. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're not missing something everyone else has figured out. You're just playing a different game, one where connection lives in the moment it's actually happening, not in the space between moments. And there's a kind of clarity in that, a groundedness that doesn't need to reach across distance to feel real. This is the kind of psychology we explore on the Glitch Psychology, the hidden patterns that explain why you've always felt slightly different from the script everyone else seems to follow. You're not disconnected. You're just differently connected. And that might be exactly what makes your relationships real.